Thank you very much for joining me. I just finished recording the last video on cleaning up the metaverse of where we had those 6 objects that projected when it shouldn't, where we had a leading 0 in Active Directory on the employee number. But I want to continue on that scenario of changing Active Directory to meet our business rules of how we create accounts. So 2 or 3 videos ago, I think it was 2 videos ago, we went ahead and we changed the SAM account name to match a format of first name dot last name. And then in the video after that, we connected our HR system. We actually needed to do the connecting of the HR before we did this portion, because if you remember, we had a target OU attribute in that database where we calculated it based upon their office location and whether they were a contractor or not. The reason we need a target OU is because we can actually tell the Active Directory management agent in an outbound synchronization rule where an object should be placed. We can also change the canonical name, the CN, to match our format that we want in our business rules. Now, I purposefully, in the database, changed where people were located. So we'll see a lot of changes of these accounts in Active Directory. So if you look at contractors, there's 25 objects, staff 25, contractors at the remote office are 24, and then 25 the staff at the remote office. So a lot of these are going to change. They're going to move around, and we'll let them, because that's going to show the power of Identity Manager. So the first step in setting this up, right after we've imported our AI management agent and all of its data, we'll need to jump over to our portal. And from there, we're just going to create another synchronization rule. Actually, we're going to modify our outbound synchronization rule to AD. And then our outbound attribute flow. We already have the account name going to SAM account name, but we'll go ahead and add a new attribute flow. And then our source is going to be a combination of strings or constant strings and account name and the target OU. So let's go ahead and start that out. So our string, we're going to need to start with CN is equal to. So we're going to pipe this over to the DN in AD. So the DN start with CN is equal to. And then we're just going to add another value in here. CN is equal to account name. And then we need to add another constant string of comma. I did not include that in the target OU. And then finally, we'll add another one here. Our target OU on AI actually imports into the OU attribute in the metaverse. So CN is equal to account name, comma, target OU. That should move the accounts to the location specified in the HR AI management agent. So we'll just go over to destination and pipe that to DN, and we'll say OK. And right now, we're not creating anything in Active Directory. We're just modifying some things. So I'm just going to leave this as it is, and then we'll say OK. And then submit. So now let's jump over to our management agent and do a full import. We'll do a full import on the MIM service. And it's updating that AD synchronization rule. We'll run the full sync. Now we have 98 provisioning renames. I changed a lot of these, I guess. No, 98 is correct because we're changing the made up account name. We're changing that to first name dot last name. So yes, we're going to have those many changes. I'm curious about that one that's not getting changed, but we'll be able to tell that once we export everything. So we can tell it's a rename. If we go to look at the distinguished name old, we see what the value was, and we see what the new value is going to be. So let's just throw caution to the wind, and let's go ahead and export that to our AD management agent, or to AD. And now we have 98 renames. Let's do a full import, and then we'll do a full synchronization. And now let's jump over to AD and let's refresh this. Now we have 50 objects at the remote office, 49 objects in the remote office contractors, no objects in the main office staff or main office contractors. It did change the canonical name to the account name, and I can just tell that by removing columns. Let's add the first name on here real fast and go back down. And let's just make sure. Okay, so yes, this is correct. So it did change all the account names. With the exception, here we go. Here's that one account that it didn't update. Naomi 88. Naomi 88 is still the account name on this person. So let's fix that first. There's only one person, so we can actually go in here and into the portal underneath users and look for Naomi, and let's just click on that. It most likely did not like that apostrophe, but we'll just go ahead and do Gilbert.O'Reilly. And then we'll say OK, submit, and now we're just going to do a Delta import this time. We have one update. We'll do a Delta synchronization. And notice that object is trying to set it back to Naomi 88. That's because our precedence flow for account name was set back to have AD first. So what that means is we're actually going to have to change that in AD. So we'll just go to account name Gilbert.O'Reilly and say OK. Go back to our management agent and do a Delta import and a Delta synchronization. It wants to export to the MIM service, and it wants to export to itself. It wants to change Naomi 88 to Gilbert O'Reilly. So we'll go ahead and run exports on both of those. We'll do the MIM service first, and there was no changes, so I'm not going to do an import. I'll export to AD next, and then I'll do a Delta import, and then we'll do a Delta sync. Now if we go back to AD and do a refresh, Gilbert O'Reilly has changed. Now let's move on and see what's wrong with our stored procedure. Remember, we have a stored procedure that pulls from the human resources database and does some calculation and throws that into an AI database. So let's go ahead and pull up AI, programming, stored procedures. And I'm just going to right click on that stored procedure and say modify. And I'm going to go down to the insert into. I'm going to actually take the select from there and take all of that and copy it. And then I'm going to open up a new query window and paste it and run it. Let's take a look at this data. So we have remote office, and we have full-time and contractor, and they're at the remote office. Well, let's actually move these over. Let's pull the office and the employee type together. Just move that up and rerun that so it can see it easier. And let's go ahead and remove all these other fields because we know that this is working correctly. Right before the target OU, I'm going to go and delete all of these lines, and then we'll rerun it. So remote office staff, that's correct. That's what we want. Remote office contractors, that's correct. remote office staff, remote office contractors. So it looks like it's pulling everyone as remote office. Well, let's actually pull the P dot employee. Oh, I noticed my problem here. P dot employee number. That's not right, is it? It should be P dot office. If I remember my fields correctly, let's go up into our human resources database, tables, people, columns, p.office. So I believe that's our error that we found here. So let's pull p.office and see what we get. 2010, 2010, 1010. So that's the problem. So we just need to change our case when p.employee number to p.office. So let's go back into our modify query that we had here. And then we're going to change case when p.employee number to p.office. So before we change that inside of our stored procedure, let's actually change it here and see if it corrects it. So I'm just changing that and hitting F5 again. So there we go. We have main office. Now we have remote office. So that's what it was. So let's just go over to our new query. When we right clicked on the stored procedure and said modify, we can actually modify this right in here. We'll change the p.employee number to p.office on both. And then we'll just run this again and it's going to modify our stored procedure. We'll close this out. We'll close out of this one as well. Now, if we go ahead and try and run the table of selecting the columns, this hasn't changed anything because we haven't executed the stored procedure yet. We're going to have to right click and say execute and OK. And now when we rerun that query, everything should be correct. The display name, that's a generated field. So the display name uses the first, middle, and last. No, your monitor didn't mess up and I didn't do any shoddy editing. I actually wanted to flash back to 2 or 3 videos ago when I was creating the AI database, the people table, and creating the stored procedure to move the data from HR to the AI database. What I'm doing here is I'm creating all the columns and assigning the data type for the people table in the AI database. And what happens is, well, you know what? I'm about ready to save, so let's see. I'm going to just go ahead and save it as people. And then we'll close it out and close this out as well and say, oh, me. Yeah, I messed up. If you didn't catch it, I closed out of that SQL query where later on I actually showed in the video it appeared as if I did nothing wrong and created it as a stored procedure. Well, that's because I'm going back through here hastily at midnight trying to recreate that query, and I used employee number instead of office to compare an office number. But anyways, let's go back to the here and now. So now we can go back to our management agent and do a full import on our AI database, and then we'll do a full synchronization. And so we have 50 provisioning renames in AD, so we'll let that export. Notice how fast that change was. I'm always impressed that I've had 2,000 changes export like that. I'm always impressed of how fast these changes can be made. And so we'll just finish this cycle here and run a full import, and then we'll run a full sync. Now let's jump back over to AD and refresh. There we go, 25 objects in here. Let's refresh each of these OUs, 24 objects, and go to the main office staff, 25 objects, contractors, 25 objects. So let's go through here and look at a couple of things. It looks like we don't have the telephone number populated. It looks like we have the addresses populated. And it looks like the office doesn't match whether or not it's the main office or remote office. So let's actually update this data. Let's go back to our synchronization rule, the outbound synchronization rule for AD, and let's add some more attribute flows here. So let's take the physical office delivery name to the physical office delivery name in AD, and we'll say OK. Let's add postal code to postal code and telephone number to telephone number, and then we'll say OK. So there's two more attributes that I want to update in AD. The street address as well as the middle name. So if I try and add the destination, I do not have street address and I do not have middle name. Well, why aren't these showing up? Well, let's go ahead and cancel out of that and let's save with OK and submit. Now let's go over to our management agent, our AD, and open that up with a double click and select attributes. It's because they're not selected in here. So middle name is not selected, so we'll go ahead and select it. Street address is not selected, so we'll select that as well. And then we'll say OK. Now if we go back and open up the outbound synchronization rule, and on the attribute flow tab, we'll add middle name to middle name. It's there now. So is street address. So if you don't see them in the list here, it's because they're not selected in the management agent. So we will allow nulls to go out to the middle name because not everybody has a middle name. We allow nulls to come in from the data source, so we'll allow them to go out. So we'll say OK. And then one last attribute I'm going to add postal address to street address. Now you might say, how do I know which attribute should be in the source and which should be in the destination? Well, let's OK and submit. Now if we go back to our synchronization service manager, and then let's just do a metaverse search and let's pull up someone and double click on them. These are the objects in the metaverse. So I can go in here and see, oh, okay, so my postal address is actually my address. If I don't remember where I've imported attributes from the AI management agent, I can always come in here and look at an object's properties and see what my sources should be. And in AD, if we go to AD and open up an account and then attribute editor, we can actually see these attributes and their values. So if you're curious as to what the telephone number is and it's not filled in, well, you can enter sample data and apply it and go to the attribute editor and then find that data in here. And so there's the telephone number. I'm going to leave that as it is because I'm going to update it. So there's a couple things we need to do. Let's go back to our management agents. We've selected new attributes to import. So we need to do a full import on that, and we'll do that. So we have 99 updates. Let's go ahead and do a full import on our MIM service to get the updated synchronization rule. And now we can do a full sync on our MIM service. And now let's do a full sync in AD. And so we have 99 attributes to export. Let's open it up and see what we have. Well, we're adding the middle name. We're also modifying the physical office delivery name to match their remote or main office. We're also adding the telephone numbers from our HR system. And if there are changes, it'll update the postal code and the street address. So we'll just close that out and let it export to AD. So I'm going to do a full import and a full sync, but I'm getting tired of saying run full import, run full sync. So I'm going to configure a run profile, and I'm going to say a new profile, full import and full sync. And then in the drop down, there's a full import and full sync there. So I'm just going to choose that and say next and finished and OK. And now I'm just going to run that full import and full sync. It'll do both at the same time. Import to the connector space and then synchronize it to the metaverse. And so everything's updated. So if we jump into AD, we see we now have the telephone number. The office is main office. And the address and everything else that we've told it to update is correct. The middle name is not displayed on this main screen. It's actually in the attribute editor, but that is updated as well. If you don't have the attribute editor tab, if you go to view and advanced features, that's how you can enable that. So I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to try and keep these next little bits short. So all we've done is added more attributes into Active Directory to have the AI management agent, the authoritative source, which it comes from HR system. So hopefully this video has been informative for you. Hopefully you've liked it as well. And if so, please hit that little bitty thumbs up button for me. You could subscribe or add comments down below. But either way, I hope to see you next time.